The drama surrounding Caitlin Clark's rumor rejection of the WNBA's newest CBA proposal has shaken the league to its core, turning what was supposed to be a historic turning point into a moment of crisis that no one saw coming, except maybe those who had been warning for months that trouble was quietly brewing beneath the surface. What began as whispers behind the scenes has erupted into a full-scale confrontation, one that threatens to push the WNBA straight into a 2026 lockout and force the league to confront the very issues it has avoided for years. For a long time, league executives tried to project calm. They repeated the same familiar phrases, that discussions were healthy, that negotiations were progressing, that both sides were committed to a better future. Fans accepted it. Reporters echoed it. Even longtime insiders assumed that with the WNBA finally riding a wave of unprecedented visibility, both sides would naturally find a way to meet in the middle. After all, how could they not? The league was growing. Attendance was surging. Merch sales were hitting new highs. Caitlin Clark alone had brought millions of new eyeballs to every arena she stepped into. This was supposed to be the era of expansion, not collapse. But behind the curtain, the mood wasn't calm. It wasn't optimistic. It wasn't even polite. Players who attended closed-door meetings came out frustrated. Concerns about salary structures, travel demands, workload, and transparency didn't just go unanswered. They were ignored. Veterans felt a familiar ache, the same one they'd felt in previous negotiations when promises sounded good, but evaporated the moment they hit paper. Younger players, especially those whose arrival had fueled the sports boom, privately wondered how a league celebrating such massive growth could present a proposal that felt stuck decades in the past. The first crack in the facade came when reports surfaced that the WNBA's highly publicized $1.1 million max salary wasn't a real figure at all. It was conditional, dependent on a labyrinth of incentives, performance requirements, team success, minutes played, and award benchmarks, a structure that placed all the risk on the players and none on the league. What many initially celebrated as a long-awaited breakthrough quickly became a cautionary tale of numbers crafted to impress headlines, not to improve lives. With every page of the proposal that leaked, the illusion faded faster. Players realized the advertised million-dollar salary wasn't guaranteed in any meaningful way. Missing even one incentive target meant losing a massive chunk of pay. A late-season injury could slash earnings without mercy. A brutal travel schedule could punish players for resting their bodies. A team slump, something an individual athlete often has no control over, could erase their financial security in an instant. The frustration spread like wildfire. Group chats filled with screenshots. Agents compared notes. International players pointed to vague commitments that sounded more like placeholders than promises. And somewhere in the center of every conversation, one name kept coming up, the name the league had quietly built its entire negotiating strategy around: Caitlin Clark. League executives believed Clark would be their anchor, the star whose acceptance would neutralize criticism. They assumed her presence alone would pressure others to fall in line. But the moment Clark's camp made it clear she refused to sign a deal built on conditions instead of respect, the league's strategy collapsed overnight. Her stance wasn't dramatic. It was principled, deliberate, and rooted in her understanding of the responsibility she carried as the most visible player in the sport. If she signed a broken deal, the next generation would inherit the same broken system. So she didn't sign. And everything changed. Across the league, players noticed immediately. Some felt shock. Others felt relief. Many admitted later that Clark's refusal was the first moment they sensed a real shift in power. If the league's most visible figure wasn't going to be used as leverage, then no one else had to be manipulated either. Her refusal became a rallying point, a moment that unified players who previously felt isolated in their frustrations. It told rookies, journeymen, role players, international athletes, and future prospects that their concerns mattered just as much as the star who filled arenas. It didn't take long for insiders to start connecting the dots. The WNBA wasn't just failing to meet player demands, it was banking on optics to carry them. Flashy headlines, vague promises, and half-defined revenue-sharing ideas were meant to distract from the reality that the proposal offered no true structural change. And once the Players Association confirmed that the league still hadn't presented a transparent revenue-sharing system, the tone shifted completely. Players had been asking for years for a model that scaled with the league's growth, something that reflected rising profits and increased viewership. Instead, they were met with phrases like collaborative potential frameworks and future opportunity metrics, phrases that sounded official but meant nothing. There was no percentage breakdown, no clear formula, no measurable system. They were being asked to trust a promise with no structure behind it. That was the final breaking point. When ESPN reporter Alexa Christopoulos revealed that even the players sitting at the bargaining table didn't know what revenue share meant under the new deal, the message was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a lack of transparency. Players were being asked to sign onto a future with no defined financial roadmap. Veterans who had seen the league make similar moves in the past recognized the tactic immediately. Younger players felt betrayed. International players felt invisible. And by the time they finished comparing notes, the collective attitude hardened into something neither the league nor its executives were prepared for: unity. Then came the article from journalist Andy Cosmo, and everything exploded. For months, tension had been bubbling privately behind closed doors. But Cosmo's report brought the truth into public view. The two sides were nowhere close to a deal. Negotiations had stalled. The extension deadline was approaching. And most importantly, a lockout wasn't just a possibility, it was becoming inevitable. Within hours of the report hitting social media, former players chimed in with their own critiques. Fans expressed outrage that a league experiencing its greatest moment of relevance was fumbling such a pivotal piece of business. Sponsors began asking questions. Analysts wondered whether the league was unprepared for the level of leverage players now held. Suddenly, the WNBA was losing the narrative. For the first time in years, players had the advantage. They had public support. They had media focus. They had recognizable stars with global reach. They had international leagues offering competitive alternatives. And most importantly, they had Caitlin Clark, an athlete who refused to be used as a public relations shield. The league's assumption had been simple: Clark's acceptance would silence doubts. Her refusal, however, amplified them. Each day that passed without progress fueled speculation that the league had underestimated both her resolve and the unity of the athletes around her. Behind the scenes, team representatives began preparing players for what a lockout would mean. That preparation wasn't symbolic. It was logistical, practical, and serious. Players were told how contracts might be paused, how international opportunities could serve as temporary income, how the league would suffer financially long before they would. The idea of a lockout was no longer a threat. It was a plan. A lockout during the league's peak moment of visibility would be a catastrophe for the WNBA. Networks would hesitate to renew deals. Sponsors would reconsider long-term commitments. Casual fans, especially those who discovered the league because of Clark's rise, might drift away. Social media momentum would stall. And owners, who had built their budgets on assumptions of rising revenue, would feel the pressure almost immediately. But to players, the risk was worth it. They had tried compromise. They had tried patience. They had tried trust. And each attempt had been met with avoidance or empty promises. The proposal wasn't just flawed. It was disrespectful. It treated them like laborers, not partners. It told them that their value was conditional, not earned. It implied that growth was something the league owned, not something the players created. The more players examined the situation, the more they realized this moment wouldn't come again. A new wave of stars had elevated the sport to unprecedented heights. Public engagement was higher than ever. Corporate interest was expanding. And for the first time in league history, athletes felt visible enough and united enough to demand real change. And now, with Clark's refusal turning whispers into battle cries, the stage was set for a confrontation the league had desperately hoped to avoid. A confrontation that could reshape the future of women's basketball. A confrontation that would determine whether this sport could finally evolve into the powerhouse it had the potential to become. The rejection of the CBA proposal didn't just expose flaws in the system. It exposed the values of the league itself. Are players partners or products? Are they respected or strategically managed? Are they equals in the business they help build? Or are they expected to accept whatever crumbs they're offered simply to keep the machine running? As the deadline looms and the league faces a crossroads unlike anything in its history, the pressure has never been higher. Everything now depends on what happens in the coming days. Will the WNBA finally choose transparency, fairness, and progress? Or will its refusal to evolve push the sport into a historic lockout, one driven not by greed, but by athletes demanding the dignity they've earned? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the players are no longer asking. They're demanding. And the future of women's basketball will be defined by the stand they take right now.